Yesterday I was walking down the street downtown Boston, and I was dressed in my clerical wear. I was wearing this stole, and I had my collar on, my clerical collar, which I'm not wearing today. It got a little wilted yesterday in the heat. And I was walking down the street, and there was someone selling copies of Spare Change, the newsprint, and as I walked by, he said, "Preacher, give me a word." And I very eloquently responded with, I had no words. And then he asked for a line of scripture, and I thought, well, okay, I don't have to think of anything. I can just recite something from the Bible. And so, of course, then I said, yeah. And I was happy that none of my elders were around to witness this failure of mine to think of anything from the Bible. I finally was able to say simply, love your neighbor as yourself. So I got that out, and that felt like the right thing to say yesterday, as it kind of set the mood for what I was doing that day, together with many folks here and many, many folks in the city of Boston. Because later that morning I stood together under the sweltering heat of the sun with my fellow citizens packed shoulder to shoulder, body to body in the streets. Bodies there gathered as diverse as the body of God, gathered together where we marched and we marched. I was mistakenly prepared for the rain, and so I was squinting against the sun, and the heat soaked into my clerical shirt. I don't know why it's black. And I could feel my stole sticking to the back of my neck, but still, even in that heat, I felt energized. Because as the heat rose, so did the people. And together, over 40,000 people fought oppression. Fought the oppression of the bodies that were represented at the march, and the oppression of people all across the country. These thousands of bodies, with sweat stinging in our eyes, marched, and we chanted our way in love. When I got home later that afternoon, I felt the burn on the sides of my head. I forget that the hair is so short there. And later that afternoon, as I felt that burn, I sat on my computer and I looked through some of the news that was coming out about the march. And I saw many posts and articles covering the march and also the smaller rally that was on the Common. I saw my own face captured on the news. I saw the celebration of the large showing of people who were rooted together in love. But the title of one article I saw read, Thousands Counter-Protest Free Speech Rally in Boston. And it's true that there were thousands of us, and this started as a counter-protest, but the wording of that article implies that perhaps we were there against free speech. But to be very clear about what was happening yesterday, we were not protesting free speech. Instead, we were exercising that same right. We were exercising our right to free speech, and in doing so, spreading our message of love, of tolerance, and of celebration of others. Our counter-protest countered the content of the speech of a very small group of people protesting on the Common. The group of 75 people gathered were understood to likely be espousing messages of intolerance. It is possible to both believe in someone's right to free speech and also not celebrate the contents of that speech. Yesterday, people showed up, and they showed up in great numbers because we want to spread the message that love is stronger than hate. In this evening's scripture, Jesus said, "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles." Jesus made clear that it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles. The speech espoused, the words spoken that represent sins of the heart. At the time of Jesus' explanation, people were concerned with ritual and with practices of cleanliness. Jesus notes that the concern should not be so much for the food that is going into one's mouth or the cleanliness of the hands that are serving that food and eating that food. Instead, concern should be placed on what comes out of the mouth. He explains further that what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles. Speaking words of hate, speaking words of racism, sexism, white nationalism, white supremacy, anti-immigration, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia are what defile a person. The words spoken from the heart also become actions of the body, as Jesus explains that out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, and slander. The words that we speak are the intentions that we set. In Charlottesville, across the nation, and in Boston yesterday, people were expressing evil intentions. Words of oppression, words to keep others down, words that promote intolerance, that are used to keep others down. If left unchecked, these are the words that can lead to violence. These are the words that in the past have led also to genocide. This understanding is what led to those 40,000 people to take to the streets yesterday. It is what led clergy, many Christians, members of this congregation to step out into the street and shout into consciousness a message of love. As Christians, we are called to work against the defilement of which Jesus speaks. We are cautioned not to defile ourselves with the words that we speak. We also have a responsibility to help ensure that the defilement of others does not lead to destruction, harm, or death. It is important to remember that it is not just public speech we should be concerned with, but also what we say in private as well. Careful that our words express love. It was nice to see the wonderful diversity among the marching in the street yesterday. Online, one of my friends posted that if you're rallying in a group of people where everyone looks exactly like you, you're probably doing it wrong. This was certainly not the case for the 40,000 people marching in the streets. But more importantly than the diversity of race, gender, ability, age, and expression was the diversity of social and religious backgrounds of those gathered. This movement was led by queer Black women of Black Lives Matter. There were also people whose primary issue of justice was immigration. There are people whose primary area of concern was reproductive health. People who focus their attention on trans rights. People who promote peace across faith lines. People whose love for the earth propels them to work for a greater good. Many of the people at the march yesterday have different issues of primary concern. It's not possible to devote large quantities of time and attention to every cause. Most people focus their attention on one or two or maybe three, a smaller number of causes, of issues of primary concern for themselves. But yesterday, everyone came together for the greater good. We're each called to work in different ways, but sometimes it becomes clear that there is something greater to work for, and we must expand our work in that mission. This is a lesson that Jesus also had to learn. In our second reading, Jesus is approached by a Canaanite woman who is pleading for her daughter. In response, Jesus says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel," meaning that he would not offer his help to her as she was a Canaanite woman. And she begs again, and in response he says, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." This woman is quick and she is bold, and she reminds Jesus that even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Jesus notes the great faith of this woman and heals her daughter. And in this moment, Jesus is made aware of the greater call than what he previously understood for himself. Jesus' ministry is changed as he understood that he could heal and minister to all people. This same lesson was carried out yesterday when people of diverse calls came together for a greater good. Sometimes our call is expanded to reach greater than we first understood for ourselves. We each have unique callings, as unique as we are individuals. Discerning that call takes patience, and it requires us to stop and to listen to God as we consider our gifts and what God would have us do. As we work in the direction of that call, it is important to continue to allow room for the Spirit. Your call may change over time. It may expand. And allowing the Spirit to move opens us to the new directions to which we may be called. I am called to march in the streets. I am called also to build relationships. I am called also to listen. I am called also to engage in conversations with those who might think and feel differently and believe differently from what I feel and believe. I'm called to engage in a difficult conversation with my Lyft driver who wanted to know what was so bad about white nationalism and white supremacy. On my way to the march, I'm having this conversation. I'm called also to engage in a conversation on Facebook where my uncle works to discredit those of us who are working for love. As you consider where it is that you have been called, consider also ways that that might change over time. Following your call requires constant consideration and listening. To discern your call, it is necessary to pray and to be still and listen for God, whether in voice or the way that you feel. But this prayer and this listening must continue through time. As individuals, we are called in many directions that may change and expand. And also as groups and corporations, we have diverse calls that may change and expand. The Metropolitan Community Church was founded in response to the hateful rhetoric against gay people. It became a Christian church that welcomed and accepted gay people. And as understanding grew, worked also to strengthen the love and inclusion of trans and other queer folks. MCC is the leader in celebrating LGBTQ folks. MCC was founded on this principle also, celebrating LGBTQ folks, celebrating the intersection of sexuality, spirituality, and justice, the thing that drew me first to the MCC. MCC Boston is preparing now to celebrate its 45th anniversary. We have so much to celebrate here at MCC Boston, but I must say that I think MCC Boston has nailed it in terms of celebrating and being the leader of celebrating and affirming LGBTQ folks. I don't think anyone has any question when they come into this space about that. And so as we look forward to our anniversary, we ought to also look forward to where else we are being called as a community, where it is that we are expanding our call. As we continue to celebrate and affirm the lives of LGBTQ folks, we must also remain open to how the Spirit is moving among us and in us, and where we might be led into our 46th year. Perhaps we will lead our work in communities to combat hate. Perhaps we will work to promote inclusion and to promote love. Or we may reach out to widen and fully embrace and celebrate other marginalized people. Where we are headed, we might not yet know. So we must remain open to where our Spirit moves and note the ways that we are called into each part of our new journey. Remain open to how the Spirit might move us and how we might move together into that future space. Amen.
Amen.